I always believed heartbreak arrived quietly, like a slow leak in the ceiling you don't notice until the whole room is ruined. But mine didn't come quietly. IT walked straight into my wedding and tore everything apart with one sentence. I heard it as clearly as the violin string quartet behind me. "That's not a mother. That's an error someone tried to dress up." The group laughed, and then my fiancée laughed too. Soft, pretending to be harmless, but sharp enough to slice something inside me cleanly in half. Northcrest Manor, the Aldrin family's pride, looked more like a palace built to worship money than host love. The ceilings arched like cathedrals. Marble floors gleamed like someone polished them with insecurity. Chandeliers dripped golden light that should have felt warm, but somehow made the room colder. A documentary crew floated around us, cameras gliding like ghosts. The Aldrins weren't hosting a wedding. They were creating footage for a legacy they thought would last forever, a monument to their perfection. I sat there in a tuxedo that felt more like armor than clothing. Across from me, my mother sat quietly in the silver dress she'd adjusted herself. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't designer. IT didn't need to be, because she carried it with a dignity the Aldrins could never buy. But I saw her hands trembling, and the smile she gave me, the one she used to hold both of us afloat when life tried to swallow us whole, felt thinner than ever. The Aldrin wedding booklet lay open in front of me. Their family section was a museum. Philanthropists, founders, board members, perfect photos, perfect poses, perfect lives. That MY page was smaller. My mother's page was barely a page at all. Just one shallow line, local stylist, community heart. No mention of the nights she worked until dawn. No mention of the sacrifices she made so I could get here. Nothing. Just enough to place her in the decorative background of their story. Then came the speeches. Gregory Aldrin spoke about my accomplishments like a CEO unveiling a new stock for investors. His wife followed, smiling as she called my upbringing humble, the kind of word wealthy people use when they want to pretend they're being kind while stepping on you. People chuckled. I felt my chest squeeze. I walked out before the pressure made me say something I couldn't take back. But life is a habit of breaking you exactly where you try to hide. Down a side corridor, I heard it. The sentence that ended everything. Victoria Aldrin mocking my mother's appearance, and Caitlin, my fiancée, laughing with her. That was the moment something inside me hardened. Crystallized, I walked back into the ballroom, grabbed the microphone, and said clearly, "This wedding is over." Gasps exploded. Cameras froze. Chairs scraped them while mother's hand trembled in mine as we walked away from everything. Everyone thought that moment was destruction, but it wasn't. It was ignition, because the very next morning, I walked into Aldrin Tower with a plan they never saw coming. The night after the wedding collapse, the world felt strangely quiet. My mother and I left Northcrest Manor, like a burning building we had barely escaped. The car ride was silent. Not uncomfortable, but heavy with the kind of grief that words could never touch. I drove us to the one place that always grounded us, the Maple Lane Diner. Faded neon flickered above chip counters. Coffee smelled like burnt honesty. Stepping inside felt like stepping back into the part of myself the Aldrins never wanted to know. We slid into our usual booth, patched with duct tape and memories. My mother wrapped her hands around her tea, borrowing warmth from it. She stared at the rising steam and whispered, "You didn't have to defend me. People say foolish things at times like these." Her voice was calm, but the tremor betrayed how deeply that insult had cut. "I didn't defend you," I said quietly. "I defended the truth." Her eyes lifted, surprised. For years, she endured disrespect as if it were life's fine print. She swallowed humiliation, so I wouldn't have to. Seeing her shrink under those ballroom lights had ignited something in me, older than anger, sharper than pride. Then my phone buzzed. An email notification flashed across the screen. Lawrence Drayden. Every document completed. Every signature finalized. The plan I had been building for months had reached its peak. I opened it and scanned the confirmation. Through hidden shell companies, I now controlled enough voting shares in Aldrin Development to challenge everything they had built. The power in my hands was unreal. I didn't tell my mother. Not yet. I stared at the diner napkin, remembering the boy I used to be, studying under flickering bulbs, listening to my mother cut hair in a strip mall salon, dreaming of building cities that didn't crush the people who lived in them. That boy would never have believed the strength now in my hands. My battle with the Aldrins hadn't started last night. It had begun years earlier, long before Caitlin, long before the engagement, long before any wedding disaster. It started the day their logo replaced the old strip mall sign from my childhood. Their company bought the building where my mother's first salon had thrived. Within months, the rent spiked. Her hours were cut. We nearly lost our home a the time. I didn't know who to blame. I only knew life got harder whenever people like the Aldrins improved neighborhoods. Their world brushed against mine long before I stepped into theirs. Tomorrow morning, they would meet the version of me they helped create, the one who no longer bowed his head. I could already see it, their empire trembling, and I was ready, because when I walked into Aldrin Tower at sunrise, everything they believed would be unshakable was about to break. The morning after the wedding disaster, the sky over Charlotte looked like cold steel. I walked into Aldrin Tower wearing the same suit, but the man inside it wasn't the same. Security scanned my badge without hesitation, unaware I now held more power in this building than the people whose portraits lined the lobby walls. Each step echoed across the polished marble, steady, deliberate, fueled by months of quiet preparation. On the executive floor, Gregory's assistant froze. "They're waiting for you," she whispered, voice tight. I entered the main conference room and found the Aldrin family and board assembled like a tribunal. Gregory stood at the head of the table, jaw clenched, vein throbbing. Caitlin sat beside him, eyes swollen, face pale. Victoria's fingers were laced together, knuckles white. They expected an apology, a surrender, maybe even a plea to be forgiven for shattering their perfect spectacle. Instead, I placed a leather fold on the table and slid out the papers, every transfer, every signature, every proof that I now controlled the company. "Before we begin," I said calmly, "there's a change you all need to acknowledge." I listed the numbers, the shares, the legally binding confirmations. As of yesterday, I finished. I hold 55% of Alden Development's voting power. Silence fell. Heavy, like gravity had doubled. Gregory barked a laugh. "Impossible. You think you can walk in here and take control after humiliating my family?" "I didn't take anything," I said evenly. "The shareholders sold willingly. I simply stepped in." Victoria gasped, struck. Caitlin half rose from her seat. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't," she whispered. Her voice cracked. I didn't need to meet her gaze. Those tears weren't for me. They were for the empire she'd watched crumble. Then one of the younger board members, someone I barely noticed in past meetings, stood. His voice shook but didn't falter. "He's telling the truth," he said. "I've seen the filings. Honestly, after what's in the books, he's the only one here who seems to care about this company's purpose." The room shifted. Power no longer belonged to Gregory's booming voice or Victoria's curated charm. It belonged to the documents between us. It belonged to truth. "You are suspended pending an independent review," I said to Gregory. "Effective immediately. And Victoria, your signing authority is revoked." Gasps rippled across the room. But I wasn't finished. I opened another file and spread out grainy photos, proof of my mother being followed by a private investigator the Aldrins had hired. "You cross a line," I said, voice cold. "Now I'm drawing one." No one spoke. The empire they built on secrecy had buckled. And yet, the real explosion hadn't arrived. Not yet. That shock would come from the one Aldrin I never expected to stand with me. Tomorrow, everything would change. The moment the photographs hit the table, the room seemed to deflate. The Aldrins' arrogance, their polished composure, their quiet superiority, all drained away like someone had pulled the plug on their power. Victoria stared at the photos as if they were alien objects. Caitlin covered her mouth, horrified. Gregory's glare could have cut glass. But I didn't flinch. I wanted them to feel the weight of everything they had done. Before anyone could speak, the younger Alden, the quiet one who had dared to stand up earlier, stepped forward. He was Gregory's son from a previous marriage, rarely mentioned, rarely noticed. His eyes held a storm I hadn't seen before. I sent those financial documents to you, he said, voice steady. Gasps scattered across the table. I couldn't watch him bury this company under lies. Gregory's head snapped toward him so violently the chair rattled. You betrayed your own family. No, the young man replied. I protected the people who count on us. You're the one who betrayed them. His hands trembled slightly, but his conviction didn't. In that moment, I realized he was the first Aldrin to choose integrity over image. I turned to the board. The audit begins today. Every suspicious contract, every shell company, every dollar routed through shadows, we expose it all. A murmur spread. Some resisted. Some looked relieved. Others terrified. That's how you know truth has finally entered the room. Victoria's voice trembled. You're doing this because of one insult, one moment. I leaned forward. You followed my mother, used her life for a narrative, erased my work, stole my ideas, mocked our existence. And you did it so naturally you barely remember doing it. This isn't about a moment. I tapped the documents. This is about a system built on other people's backs. Caitlin finally stood, wiping her face. I tried to warn them, she whispered. You weren't someone they could control. I still love you. Her confession lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. I met her eyes for a long second. Then love yourself enough to leave this room with honesty, not loyalty to rot. She sank back into her chair, the weight of her choice visible in every shiver. The boardroom was silent except for the faint hum of the city below. I gathered the documents and slid the photographs back into a folder, delivering the final blow. This company will no longer hide behind wealth and charm. We move in daylight now. And then the younger Aldrin spoke again. His voice didn't shake this time. There's more you need to see. I froze, because what he revealed next didn't just threaten the Aldrin's legacy, it threatened the entire city. The room held its breath. I could feel it, the tension thick enough to taste. Every eye in that boardroom knew the game had changed. And I knew, in that moment, that nothing would ever be the same. The younger Aldrin led me down a quiet hallway to a smaller conference room, away from the polished smiles and cracking egos of the main boardroom. His steps were quick, urgent, like a man who had waited years for someone else to finally see what he'd seen all along. When he shut the door, he dropped a thick binder on the table-worn edges. Exhausted staples, no glossy logo, no branding. These aren't just financial inconsistencies, he said, flipping it open. This is everything your audit only scratched. Entire neighborhoods, whole districts built on inflated budgets, ghost contractors, non-existent oversight. He pointed to a map with red markers. Money wasn't just disappearing, it was being redirected. Quietly, consistently, for years. As he spoke, the puzzle pieces clicked. The Aldrins hadn't just skimmed, they had manipulated development to trap communities. Parks left half-finished so they could build for ongoing phases. Sidewalks repaired 3 times a year, each repair generating new invoices. Public housing delayed, emergency contract inflated. It wasn't incompetence. It was calculated. How long have you known? I asked. Since my internship, he said. They never let me near real authority. I wasn't the heir they wanted, just the one asking questions. I didn't have courage to speak up until you walked into that ballroom and refused to bow. That woke something in me. I didn't expect that, not from an Aldrin. But truth doesn't choose a vessel. It chooses the moment that we returned to the boardroom with the binder. As the documents spread across the table, chaos erupted. Lawyers scrambled. Executives paled. Cameras clicked. Victoria slammed her hand on the table, insisting the papers were out of context. Gregory accused his own son of fabrication. But the numbers didn't lie. Neither did the dates, signatures, or bank trails. Within 24 hours, the full audit team arrived. Within 72, city officials began public hearings. The empire the Aldrins had built on polished surfaces, and hidden decay began peeling apart piece by piece this time. Under public scrutiny, I stepped back once the interim board structure was finalized. I didn't want their throne. I wanted accountability. And I had it. Weeks later, I stood with my mother at the opening of the L Foundation's first community space. Kids laughed on brand new courts. Volunteers painted murals. Families walked through halls built with real budgets, real oversight, real dignity. My mother squeezed my hand. You didn't just defend me, she whispered. You defended every person they buried behind fancy words. I looked out at the crowd for faces full of hope, not fear. No, I said softly. I just made sure people like you finally get the light they deserved all along. And if the world thinks this was the end, they have no idea what comes next. The dust from the Aldrin collapse settled slowly, like ash drifting after a long burning fire. Headlines chased fresher scandals. But I wasn't done, not with the truth, not with rebuilding, and not with the people left behind by promises the Aldrins never kept. I spent the next weeks walking through neighborhoods their developments had touched. Some were uplifted, many neglected, all carrying stories no report could capture. One evening, I visited the Lincoln District, the project that started it all. The sun sank behind the high-rise skeleton the Aldrins had abandoned halfway through construction. Rusted scaffolding clung to the building like brittle ribs. The empty lot beneath it had become a playground for kids with nowhere else to go, running between beams that should have been green space years ago. A mother pushed a stroller along cracked pavement, navigating a street repaved 3 times without fixing the foundation. This was the real cause of corruption lived, breathed, unavoidable. That a man approached near the chain-link fence. I recognized him from one of our early City Pulse workshops. You're the guy who shut the Aldrins down, he said. No anger, only tired gratitude. They promised hope. Instead, it was a drain. Thanks for forcing the truth into the open. I nodded, feeling the weight of what was still undone. Exposing wrongdoing wasn't the same as repairing the damage. Not even close. The next day, city officials contacted me. They wanted City Pulse to redesign the Lincoln District public spaces, pedestrian flows, street repairs, lighting grids, the works, with transparency, community voting, and oversight built in from the first drawing. They offered full creative direction, something no developer had ever granted me that I didn't decide immediately. I visited my mother first. She was in her small Raleigh salon, sweeping the floor between appointments like she had for decades. When I walked in, she leaned on her broom and smiled. That look on your face, she said, means you're deciding something big. I told her about the offer. Told her I worried people would see me as another outsider promising too much. She placed her hand over mine. A title doesn't build trust, she said. Consistency does. Effort does. You showed the city the truth. Now show them what honesty can build. So I accepted. For the first time, Lincoln District wasn't just a blueprint. Residents sketched ideas. Kids suggested playground locations. Elderly neighbors voted on benches, lighting, and safe paths home. City Pulse became what I had always dreamed, a tool for people who had always been spoken over. The Aldrin Empire faded, but the city began to glow with possibility as groundbreaking day approached. I realized something important. The story hadn't ended at the wedding or in the boardroom. Those were merely sparks. The moment we broke ground on Lincoln District, someone unexpected stepped forward, someone claiming the Aldrins weren't done with me yet. And they had proof that I froze. Because this time, the threat wasn't just personal. It was bigger, wider, and more dangerous than anything I had faced before. The city held its breath with me. And whatever came next, we would face it together.